Hello, this is a City Voices interview with Yael. We'll just use your first name, okay, Yael?
Perfect.
All right. So, Yael, what was it like growing up and where did you grow up?
Um, I grew up in Mount Zion, Jerusalem, which is a holy mountain for Jews, Christians, Muslims, and probably more. Um, Growing up in a neighborhood like this, I wouldn't say a neighborhood, a small part of this mountain in a ultra Orthodox community, Jewish Orthodox community, was fun. Spent a lot of time outside. Had a lot of friends. Well, I wouldn't say a lot of friends, but we had a few families that grew up, in the same space, and we all played together. It doesn't matter what age. Um, and then religion came in. As we grew older, we had more tasks and then more rules, as it's called in the Jewish, in the religious tradition, mitzvot. And it started becoming challenging for me because some things, didn't make sense. So with beautiful upbringing of doing whatever, I wanted to do and playing outside and having a fun time and, connecting a little with nature, I had a lot of responsibility on me
Time
because,
out.
yeah.
What did not make sense?
Mm. In terms of
What
in
you
terms of
said, there was something that didn't make sense to you. Was it about Judaism?
yes, about I was taught that I'm a Jewish person and I kind of have a job uh, to be something specific in the world, and my future is to marry a Jewish scholar, a man, and to be a mother to children, to continue this tradition. And there was something special about me because I was Jewish. As a very young child, it didn't make sense to me that I'm special because I'm Jewish. And it didn't make sense to me the way I was being raised in, doing good deeds, helping each other. Um, in Hebrew, I mean, it's called, like, treat others like you would treat yourself. One sentence that is very big for me. And another one, that treating a person in the right way comes before any Torah, or Bible study or command. And those two, in my specific neighborhood, I saw less of that. So it didn't make sense for me because I was taught something, but then I didn't see it around. And that's when I started asking questions.
You're on a roll, Yael. Keep going.
Okay. So I started asking questions. I think I was about 5 or 6 years old. I would stand outside my parents' house in a place that we call the gate. Um, there was a little patch of, grass and weeds in the summer when they would dry up, and I would stand outside and talk to God and ask him, how could it be that you gave us the Bible, less than 6,000 years ago and left us? And that is a question that is very vivid in my mind. I remember that experience. And my parents they became religious. They didn't grow up, they grew up secular. So they were learning on the way, and they were, they married, they met, in this yeshiva on Mount Zion, and they married, and they were learning while we were, you know, brought into the world. And I felt like I couldn't ask questions. So I would bottle everything up inside. And on the other part, I would talk a lot. I would try. I would make noise from being uncomfortable. But the important questions I knew I couldn't ask because this is how I'm brought up. This is how I'm supposed to live. And I kind of closed up inside. And I grew up in a very, very, very beautiful place. Mount Zion. I would wake up Saturday morning, which is the Sabbath, and we would go to synagogue, men and women and children, and it was playful. I didn't really like to sit and say all the prayers, but I liked the action of being there and watching what kind of action is happening in the boys' side. And I would prepare these snacks for everyone. That's called like a kiddush, where people say a prayer and they have some food, and I would prepare that. But the most exciting thing for me was to walk outside my parents' house on Saturday morning, and I would stand in the gate, and 2 meters below me there was this big parking lot, and buses with tourists from all over the world would show up at our door, from China, Africa, Japan, Russia. And 35 years ago, 40 years ago, they would come they wouldn't look like tourists. They would come with all their wear, like the traditional clothing, and they would come to the Last Supper room, which was the kind of like the backyard of where I lived. And they would show up there, and I remember sitting there and just watching and waiting to see what kind of people are going to walk down and come out of these buses on this Saturday. So, that's one part of how I grew up. And another part is I started taking a lot of responsibility on myself, because I've kind of understood that I can't, go my own way when I'm 6 years old or 7 years old. I have parents, I need a shelter, I need food, people to take care of me. So I started taking on a lot of responsibility on myself, with helping with cooking and cleaning, and all my siblings did it, but I feel like I took on a lot. And I started taking people's feelings on me as well. My father would get upset, and it happens sometimes that parents get upset. I would think it's always because of me. And if something would happen in the house, it was my fault. And if something wasn't clean, so I would, get upset trying to get everyone to come together and just clean up this mess. Because if we would clean up this mess, and all the toys would be in place, and the living room looked like it should look, and like I thought it should look, I would have peace and quiet in my mind. And so it's a very interesting upbringing. If you'd asked me this question 10 years ago, I would say I grew up in a horrible place. I had some fun, but I'm grateful to see that it has changed, and it's been filled with many, many experiences.
All right. What was the worst period of your life?
The worst. It started when I was about 15 years old. I realized that I kind of made this internal decision without knowing that I made it, that I'm just going my way, that I'm just going. I started hiding wearing pants, and because I was kind of forced to wear a skirt, even though I thought it was less modest because it would fly in the wind, and I was a kid that climbed the trees, but no one understood me. And I wanted to wear pants so badly that I you know, I worked since I was about, 12 years old, and I started making, and having some money aside. And I would go out to these, sometimes parties, I would hear on the radio that there's this party going on, and I would go out to these places, but I would go alone. So I would get into trouble. I almost got, very hurt by a man once because I was alone at a party and they took a bunch of us kids home and I was the last one. And so it kind of started when I was 15, and I made this decision that if I reach 26 and I don't know how to live, I'll just die. It didn't start as a suicidal thought. It started as something that made a lot of sense to me, that I'll try my best with the tools that I got and the tools that I didn't get, and there were a lot of them. So I started having these, ideas that I was trying to get myself together, but I also had this, hope that maybe I won't need to because I'll, disappear from this world. So that happened. I started, working and trying to find my place, flying to my grandmother in, New York for the first time with my mother when I was 17. I was amazed that there's a whole world out there. My mother lived in the West Village. My grandmother lived in the West Village. So it was, I was in shock. I was like, what do people do? Like, where do they go when they go in the morning? How do people, buy these clothing? What do the bartenders do when they're not tending? I didn't know. I wasn't aware of the world because I was always in my head trying to figure myself out. And I was shocked, but I was also amazed. And I promised myself that when I go back home with my mom after this trip, I'm going to make money and I'm going to come back here to live with my grandmother. And I did. I think it was, less than 6 months after I got back home, or maybe a year. I told my parents, it was before I was 18. I said, I'm going to live with grandma, like it or not. You have two choices. I either throw myself off a roof or you let me go. I didn't have to, I didn't have, I was very, I didn't try to be mean to my parents. I was just very real. That's what I said. I said, you have two choices. I either throw myself off a roof or I go live somewhere in Israel till I'm 18 and then I have the permission to go. So I went. I lived with my grandmother trying to figure it out, working, with Israelis because I felt comfortable. And I left for 2 years. I came back to do to serve in the Israeli army, trying to find myself. And then when I came back after my service, I lived with my grandmother, and I started feeling very low, like I was starting to spiral in this deep hole. I did not understand what was going on with me. Years later, I understood that that's what people call depression, but I didn't know, and I didn't share with my grandmother because I wasn't so open with how I feel because I didn't know I could, even though she was very accepting and very loving and very kind, and she did whatever she could for me. But I was like this, kind of like this lost case that was, my hope was being with her. And I remember that the situation became so hard that I woke up in the morning and I did not know what black t-shirt to wear. And I had two of the same in my hands. I just couldn't anymore. I couldn't imagine what was it like to how I would walk down one flight of stairs to go work in the coffee shop that I was working at and ask people what would they like to drink today. to the point where my bosses would have to put me in the back decorating cakes because I couldn't talk. I just couldn't. I was so insecure and depressed that I couldn't talk. And I also didn't know how to share it with people. I was 24 by now. A couple months after I got to my grandmother, she passed away. She was 94. She lived an amazing life, but I was broken because she was my hope. She was my runaway. She was my safe haven. And the only place to go was back home to my parents. I always knew I had a physical home there. No matter where I was, they had a house. They had a home to live in. I went back, and I don't know when it started, but I started feeling very elevated. Started visiting all my childhood friends, and I was by my parents. So I didn't wonder how people were living, because that was just like the regular, daily life, the place my parents grew up in, Mount Zion, everything was familiar. And I started working. I worked in a restaurant in the morning, and I found another job, cleaning houses. All I did was trying to make money that I can rent my own apartment and live on my own, and try to figure out this life. I don't have a lot of time. I have 2 years till I'm, my limit. And I became so elevated that I didn't know what was going on with me. I started having all these elated experiences. I felt like I can do things that I never thought I could before. There was no doubt in my mind that I could succeed. I started having these thoughts like I'm this kind of savior, and I have these powers to help people heal. And wait, and I'm Messiah, but wait, I can't be Messiah, so maybe I'm Moses. And all the Bible and everything I learned and people I've known and the movies that I watched and things that I saw all flooded in, and I stopped sleeping, and I had all these conspiracies about the world and about water and about what we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to do. And this was all very weird to me, because I never thought like this. I never thought about, I love to help people. I was amazing when I worked and when I served, when I worked at a restaurant, I was very good at, but I never had these kind of thoughts of, and it was a kind of a disaster, because I started losing everything I had and everything I made, and I lost all this weight. I was very heavy, and I lost all this weight, and I couldn't sleep, and my mother, was trying to help me, and I had, what we call psychotic episode. And I mean, this goes on a long time. This story can, the episode itself was about, it lasted for more than 2 months, because I was hospitalized in Israel, and then I left the hospital because I thought they were poisoning me with the medicine. So I ran away, and then I walked the streets of Jerusalem, and I was trying to help myself, and I found myself at night in very dangerous places, and I got raped. And then I really wanted to die, because I was a very, very strong person. I was physically strong. And that happening to me was even more devastating than anything. And that was one of the worst experiences, because, having, a psychotic experience, you don't really know what's going on, but someone doing something like that to you, you know what's going on, and you know that that's not supposed to happen. And the shame of me not being able to protect myself, that was the worst for me. And I guess the worst experience after all this happened, when doctors told me that I will have to be medicated for the rest of my life, because that was like another prison. Like I can never be free. I'm always, I have to be dependent on something. So that's where a different journey of mine started. And I think that was one of the worst. And I would say from 24 to 30, I had 5 episodes and in a very short amount of time. And I guess those were the worst times of my life.
What was it like being in a psychiatric hospital in Israel?
Is it different? I'm not,
I don't know.
well,
Did you experience it in the United States as well?
yes. I was hospitalized in St. Vincent's, in a hospital that I understand is no longer standing. I think it's about 6th Avenue and 11th Street, something like that. There was a hospital there. It was very close to my grandmother's house, so I knew about it. Being hospitalized in Israel, in the first time, it was horrible because I did not know what I was doing there. I walked out to the, balcony and I saw all these weird people that looked like sick, and they were talking about, drugs and medication, and everyone is having their own episode and they're all talking about it. And I'm like, what am I doing here? I'm normal. And I experienced a very, I'll say a bipolar experience in the hospital, because I was, I remember one experience when I tried to leave the ward that I was in, because I was frightened, right? I couldn't leave and I didn't understand why you're not letting me leave. I was locked up. And one of the guards, shut the door, but my hand was stuck in the middle. And this is a big guard. So my hand is fractured now. And I don't understand where I am. And I don't understand why I'm there. And there's so many, people hospitalized there that no one understands that I want to know why I'm here. And no one has the patience, because I have to take care of everyone. And I was so drugged that, my experience was that I wasn't seen at all. I was left, in my room to roll in my own shit till someone came and took care of me, which was, a dear friend and a sister. I found myself, one of my sisters found me sitting in the smoking room, putting cigarettes out on my fingers. And when she asked me why, I thought that it's because I don't want the police to find me, so I have to burn my prints. And no one was there to stop me. There was a very, very kind nurse. She was an Arab nurse. I remember that. Her kindness was shocking. And she tried to help me as much as she could. And she told me that if I acted properly, she would take me out to the garden. And there were 2 things that shocked me with what she said. Because first, there's a garden in this ward? And 2 is, what do you mean by act nice? I didn't understand what she meant. But I asked her, what does it mean? What do you want me to do? She said, have a little more patience, wait for the doctor when we say to wait for the doctor, try to ask a question once, and when we have time, we'll answer, try to spend time in the art room. And she was the first one who engaged with me, who told me what to do. And I didn't understand that I was asking. I was, being on medication, I think I was on 11 kinds of medication in that hospitalization. My body did not have the patience to have patience. My body was like on steroids. Like, how can I stop talking? I couldn't, even if I tried. I tried to be. So the experience was it was filled with a lot of things. That's what I can share with you.
Do you find that all these psychiatric hospitals that you were in, they're basically the same, lock the door, medicate the patient, some kindness, but often lots of neglect?
Yes. I don't know how it is today, because I'm so grateful I haven't been in this situation for 10 years. I have recovered. I'm no longer on medication for 6.5 years.
Okay, let's talk about your recovery.
Okay. Okay, wait 1 second. I want to share something about the other question, okay? There was a point in that hospital, you don't have to put the name in when I was hospitalized in New York, where I noticed that the doctors just want a break because they can't answer the questions that I have. And I decided to be quiet. And once I did, I was let out of the hospitals 4 days later, which to me was amazing because I can get out. But I wasn't in a state to function. I wasn't functioning. I was on very, very heavy medication. I could hardly walk. It was probably unsafe to send me home to, walk down the subway stairs alone. So, and in that hospital as well, I was, there are many strange things that happened, because at night, we're on medication. People found their way, there are a lot of, it's very unsafe, I would say, to be in a mental hospital that's not under, that we're not on, we don't have help and someone looking at us and watching over us with a kind heart, trying to help us 24/7.
How did you begin your recovery?
The first moment I realized that there may be a different way to look at in life. I was on one of the yellow school buses, on a run, on the school bus run, letting the afternoon class home. And I sat by the driver and we started talking. And he told me, everyone is racist. And I was offended. He was an African driver and I am, my skin is white or clear. And I had neighbors that were African, growing up in Jerusalem. And I didn't think of myself like that. And he said, You don't understand what I mean. I said, so can you explain? And he said, when you look at a tree, what do you think? I said, oh. I said, before you're able to think, you think it's green, you know how its leaves look. You don't look at the tree. You're looking at what you think at the tree. And it took me a really, really long time to understand what he meant. But after that ride, I stopped by the next tree that I saw. And I saw that there was a difference between the tree and between what I think about the tree. That was one of the first moments that kind of pointed me back to remember that connection, that I would talk to this imaginary God, and I would walk around the streets of New York being grateful for everything I don't have. And that was a lot. I was just being grateful for all the bad stuff. And a few years later, a friend of mine invited me to a workshop she was giving in London. And I remember, on my trips back from New York to Jerusalem, I would every once in a while stop in her house. And I remembered that sitting in her living room felt like what people describe how it is to sit on the beach. And I wanted that. So I flew over and I sat at this workshop, and I heard them talking about a man who said that insecurity is a thought. Now, I didn't know what it meant, but I thought that insecurity was part of my personality. Till then, I thought my personality was mad, upset, and insecure. And when I heard that, an uneducated man that had that experience and, his life changed, I thought that if an uneducated man can have that experience, also I can. And those that workshop that went on for 3 days opened up my mind. This was, to these, teachings, or this understanding of Sydney Banks, um, which was called many things, and now it's called the Three Principles. When I left there, I understood that everyone live in the middle of mental health. They just don't know it. I didn't know what it meant. I wasn't included in that, but at least I knew that everyone else is, and that was a big relief for me, because I tried to save the world all the time. And another thing was that I realized that our experience happens from within. And I really felt that if we all knew that, everyone in the world knew that we are responsible for our experience, or that we can take responsibility for our experience and see it and help ourselves, only then we would have peace. And when I shared that with my friend, she said, "That's great. Let's start with you." And that's how my journey to recovery started. Not even recovery, I wouldn't say, because I never thought then, I didn't think I could recover. But that's when I saw that life can be lived differently.
What happened with all these medications inside you?
A few years later, I went to maybe a couple years later, I went to the conference in London, and I listened to Dr. Pettit in the small room, one of the breakout rooms, and he said something about medication. And I said, and I started learning that I'm a spiritual being in a physical body, blah, blah, blah. And I had so much pride. And he said, when we understand our connection to our spiritual, something like that, don't take me by the word, we'll understand when, what to do with medication. That's what I heard. That's what I thought he said. And I got so mad. I was like, I'm a spiritual being. What is he talking about? Spirituality. And I created a black book. I put, Dr. Pettit's name in it. And I did not listen to any, tapes or recording of his in this, year to come. And I went back to the same conference the next year. And I've sat in the same breakout room. I think I was going there to be right. Like, I'm going to show you that, I know something. And someone across the room asked the same question that I asked a year ago. And well, I knew the answer, so I guess my mind shut up. And I was waiting for the other person to get upset as well. But when Dr. Pettit answered him, when we'll understand the connection to our spiritual nature, we'll know what to do. Something happened inside of me. And I saw the chain reaction of thoughts over and over again. I saw how incrementally this psychosis would happen. Like, I would get mad and upset, and then it would continue, and my brain would just explode slowly, slowly, and these episodes would happen. And I saw it. It's like I saw it in my mind how it happened. And once I saw it, I knew that I'll be able to stop it. And in that moment, I knew that I'm on the way to health. I knew that there will come a day that I'll get off medication. And I did. I started looking and searching online. I didn't search too much because I'm not a big researcher. And I took a few months and I started, leaning off medication. But I mean, I was on lithium for 12 years and, Depakote and Voltaren and so many medications over the years. But, 12 years on lithium is not a joke. And I didn't know what was going to happen later. I thought because of what I saw, nothing will happen. I thought I'll just be okay. But I did it very, very slowly. And I did not realize I started losing myself. It was very different. It was quiet because I was telling myself, it's just a thought. It's just a thought. So even though it was helping me, I was dismissing people that were trying to help me, or my siblings that were telling me, you're not okay. Or people that I know telling me, you're acting different. And I started, becoming religious and listening to all these, religious rabbis and doing what they say, and all this where it doesn't come from my heart or something that I think. It's because the mind, someone says something, okay, go do it. And it became a hot mess. It became such a hot mess. I became religious very very quickly. In this quiet episode, I was introduced to someone. We got married in this religious wedding. Mind you, I was dating women for the last 20 years. And I found myself marrying this person that I don't know, that I really have no interest, just because religious wise, this is the way to connect to God. I was basically using him. Years later, I met him and I said, I'm sorry, but I apologize, but I was not okay. And I didn't realize that all this was happening because I was off medication. But the interesting thing happened that the day after the wedding, I was very, very anxious before, but I did not notice that I was anxious. I thought it was because of the wedding. And the day after the wedding, I mean, that night, when the wedding was happening and I was still anxious, I knew there was something wrong. I knew there was something wrong way before, but I was on such a roll, I couldn't stop. And the day later, I left. Took me a little while to get the divorce papers, but the next day, I woke up from this episode. I realized that everything that I was doing in the last few months was not calm, was not quiet, was not living a life. It was running and chasing and doing the right thing and listening to others and rabbis and people that I would, it's not that I would never talk to them. It wasn't my way. I have my connection with creation. It's not in that way. And I always knew that. I knew that since I was a child. But there was this sense of fake belonging, like coming back to my parents and to this community that was not real because it wasn't my community, it was their community. And the day later, when I woke up from that, I realized that I can't listen to anyone anymore. No principles, no tapes, no rabbis, no nothing. And then I became depressed because I realized what I did in the last few months when I was supposedly aware, right? Because I was in the world of the principles a few years and I started getting my life together. So now it was even more devastating. And for 3 months, I um, I took a little lithium, not the amount that I did before, for like 2 months. Um, if I was taking, I don't know, 1,200 milligrams a day, so I was taking like maybe 200, but I was just doing it because I had to see, I had to check for myself. I had to check for myself what is going on. And I couldn't trust anyone. I said, no matter what happens in my life, I'm going on this journey and I'm willing to do this journey for myself. And I didn't know anyone that got off medication. So all the advice that I was getting were from, you know, people that were doing natural healing and natural lithium, but they never experienced the experience that I experienced. So they don't know from experience. They only know from being an advisor. And after 3 months, I call my friend, the same friend in London, and I said, I'm tired of being depressed. I can't do this. I can't live. I just, all I wanted to do, I lived on the fourth floor, was climb on the roof and jump. And I didn't want to die, but I didn't want to be in this pain. This wasn't living. And it was harder because I already started seeing what living could look like. And she told me, what do you want to do? So I said, I just want to watch a movie. So she said, so watch a movie. So I said, but I can't because I'm depressed. She said, don't watch a movie because you're depressed. Just watch a movie because you want to watch a movie. I said, okay. I thought to myself, she's weird. I don't know what's up with my friend, but okay. I hung up the phone and I turned on my computer, started watching a movie. A few minutes in, I noticed my body deflating. I noticed my body relax. And that was a first for me. I never connected any health with my body. It was all in the mind. That moment that my body relaxed, I was like, wow, I'm okay. I experienced being out of my head. I experienced being in my body for a moment. I turned off the computer. It was like I woke up. I took a walk in my house. I opened the kitchen cupboards. I saw my dishes. It was like months that I didn't see my life. I wasn't in my life. I checked my closets. My clothes were there. I went out to the back. I saw my wood turning machine. My lathe was there. I picked up the sheet. My wood was there. My chisels were there. And I sat down and I made a decision that I am just going to live day by day. I am not going to listen to anyone unless it's someone new that I resonate with. And I want to learn about, this thing, this body thing. And since then, I'm free of medication. I've stopped immediately because I saw it wasn't that little amount of medication. It was me noticing that there's something else to look at. And it was here. My spirit is not just somewhere here. It's living inside of me. That's what happened with the medication.
So we should end this story in a way that includes what you want to impart to the readers, right? Compose something that you want to impart from the readers based on your story.
I think it would be a gift for every person to know, including me, that everything we need in order to be who we are is inside us, and everything we need to let go of in order to be who we are is inside us. I no longer believe that it's all a thought. I see that we have emotional memories as well. And when we acknowledge the body in our journey of healing, it becomes a whole different, beautiful story. And if we can look at life in a way that we accept and acknowledge that all of us, at least once, big or small, did something bad to ourselves or to others. We made a mistake. And if we could see that and accept that now we can choose differently. That was in the past. We accept it and we let it go completely. We forgive ourselves for doing, we forgive ourselves that we accepted what others did to us, and we let go of everything that doesn't serve us. And I mean everything, and that's a lot. So if we see that, we can get into our mind, we can start thinking in a way that there's healing from everything, not just coping. I mean, the principles and many other um, helping ways, they're there to help us not just to cope. We could heal from any physical and emotional disease that we have. And to be brave, to let go of what doesn't serve us. Because I know that in the last 6.5 years, especially in the last year and a half, I've been going through a journey of noticing those little things inside that come up that I thought I would, no, it's not really there. But to be honest enough with ourselves and brave enough to see them and let them go. We can become a people that start a new beautiful world when we start it with ourselves.